initial outlook that I am that I slowly try to put to the front. Since my keyboard is malfunctioning and all that stuff, I'll just use this platform. It is not so much about villainizing Britain or villainizing Europe or villainizing the Americas, but it's so much as going to the beginning when democracy was still in its infancy, when it was still starting, and looking at the conditions, the environments that led people to choose this method. Now, this method was chosen to make sure that no one has too much power again. So it's something that they learned from the church. When the church um, managed to, I can't say dethrone, but when the church managed to bring down the power that queens and kings had on their people, and it was also trying to bring talents out, right? Because those times were the times where if you're born into a family of so and so, then you end up doing so and so. But they were obviously, they noticed obviously that there were people who had more potential than the small jobs that they were doing and would make a greater impact on the community as a whole. So I understanding that concept of democracy and then understanding Africa, how our African uh, systems work, and how democracy sort of brought about this imbalance that it's still present today, right? It's almost like we don't know whether to fully embrace democracy or not. So Africa is still young in terms of um, adapting democratic values. And I say democratic values because the rule of law does not always have to be the deciding factor. It should not always be if you don't, you get punished, or if you don't, then there'll be introspection or something, right? So in Africa, that was basically what is happening. We have a lot of unearthed potential. I think I can use the example of that young man who built his own radio station. Who's he's at MIT right now, I think, right? Um, you ask yourself how many uh, geniuses, he's basically genius, because that's his raw skill and talent are there. And now he's at MIT where he's being mentored, where his skills are being built up more. He's not seen as a threat. In Africa, we have the notion of um, threats that when one is better than the other, then maybe that makes the other insecure. You know, this person will then be able to come and take my place, and I'll lose my position. So the value, right? The value is not instilled within our people. to um, an extent where it's sort of a natural reflex, or it's a natural, it's just a natural reflex. And even in America, people haven't fully adapted democratic values. They are slowly starting to. And by this, I mean the challenge for democracy then um, was creating the citizen, and then sort of building on that concept, empowering the citizen by giving them the ability to vote. They were given a portion of power, all right, and then they in turn decide, okay, I entrust that person with the power because of what they see in that individual, right? Now, women's rights, women's rights, it's like the next frontier for us as people, right? Um, the role of women in our society and the role of women in our democratic society um, is not valued as much as the role of men within our democratic society. And to try to understand this, I then go and look back. Right, I look back at the early beginnings of African democracy now, when things were changing, and this change was enforced. Uh, Women suffered because the outlet for the powerlessness that men felt, they then took out on women, right? So, looking uh, at that period in time and seeing it as it's still, um, women can vote now, but it's a recent event, women voting. So, seeing the development of um, the role of women within our democratic system, and seeing, I trying to unearth what it should be within our democratic system, as well as looking at the social aspect of this, because it's true. If your wife or your girlfriend or your partner or whoever is also working, and there's no one to take care of the kids, you know, there's no one to run things at home, that creates a sort of unbalance. Now, this unbalance can be shared, right? It can be shared among women and men, but our customs and the African value system, uh, it suppresses this, right? When a man decides that he's going to do certain duties that a woman does, or when they decide to share their respective duties, that man is most of the time automatically viewed as a weak man, right? So men try to empower themselves by having power over women, right? And when it comes now to our democratic systems, it's the same thing. Now you have a woman that's in charge and you don't respect her as much, you don't believe in her abilities as much, and you don't want a woman to tell you what to do anyway, right? So that cripples it cripples democracy. It cripples democracy because we we have this power, right? It's like we have this unutilized power that we are not utilizing because we are too proud, right? Because men are too proud. Now, how do you incorporate women's rights into policies without it seeming biased to the male counterparts? Because the type of balance that I'm speaking about is sort of like the Olympics. In the Olympics, you have the men's division, you have the women's division. You get the fastest women, you get the fastest men, right? But they don't clash, right? But when it comes to uh, politics, when it comes to politics, they clash because it's about power. So some feel they should empower women just because, feminism, right? And some feel that women in high political that have high political status are like you know the stories of back in the day were on ships. Women weren't allowed to be on ships because if a woman is on a ship while it's going on a voyage or somewhere, then it spells bad luck. Alright. So it's superstitious elements also. Alright. And then the most important thing now is how to empower women without them taking advantage of the situation, right? Like I'm going to use the fact that I'm a woman to get ahead. And no, I'm not talking about using their body or whatever, but using the need or the current movement for women empowerment, where we see women that lack the capacity for certain duties that are in power, and women that have that capacity that are not, right? It's a self-esteem thing. I've noticed it's a self-esteem thing. So when I look back at democracy, the things that I find is it was it was mostly created by men. By men, I'm talking about male people, and most of them were soldiers to an extent. Right? They were fighting wars, to gain independence. Right? And the role of women is not celebrated. Because let's be honest here, if women were not in the equation, most of those wars would not have been won, right? So they did have a presence, and they did have an impact, albeit it wasn't a physical one. So how do you remove the physical aspect? How do you remove the physical aspect out of the equation and try to put on a pedestal uh, the intellectual capacity, skills, um, flexibility, being able to think fast, without the notion that it's a woman. Because if it's a woman, there's like, wow, a woman can do that. That's one of the. It just has to to become natural, right? Natural to the extent that women and men sort of compete, but not um, as genders, but based on their ideologies, ideas, principles, values, and so forth. So it's hard, and I think it's the way forward, and the creation of um, democracy is what I want to use in this process, right? Like um, like liberating women from the gender bullseye, right? Uh, you know, liberating women um, from the uh, stigma, stereotypes, and so forth. The whole, if a woman can do a certain things, then she's an extraordinary woman, uh, or special somehow, like it isn't expected of women. Because what this does is it leaves a lot of unearthed potential. Because without knowing it, there is sort of a road built that women, mostly women, should walk that road. And when women walk that road, it's a road men usually walk, and they have to be very brave women. And it's true, they do have to be, because they have to fight the psychological battles, the stigmatization, objectification, and all of that. But if you bring the democratic, how democracy was birthed and why into the concept, then I think there is a much more grounded idea of why it's important um, for for us to stop gender discrimination. All right. Um, I do this sarcastically when sometimes when everybody knows Adichie, where I put these love faces there, and as I repost her article or so forth. I do that not to say, I'm in love with this woman, this is the, no, I do that to sort of kill the whole concept um, that this is a lady who is so creative and brave, and her articulation, her articulation has taken gender out of the equation for her, even though she fights for women's rights. She's a feminist, but her articulation of it is that she does it for all of us, right? So what? So what? So what I'm trying to say is, you take democracy. It was a tool to liberate people, and you bring it to the front of empowering women, right? You build up the steps. You build up the steps, like I did, with superstition, and how some men use women as an outlet, and how women have low self-esteem that is birthed mostly just because of the way the world functions. Democracy changed everything. Democracy turned the peasant. Democracy birthed the poor, the poor boy Rockefeller, who became the richest man in America. That was democracy. So where he came from, and all of that was cast away because he was empowered by democracy, by being a citizen. It meant that he could participate in these initiatives, and he became successful. So if you stipulate um, women's empowerment in the same manner as you would the whole, why we have democracy, so that everybody can have a say. It means so that a man, I, it means so that women have their own voice, not the voice of women, but the voice of the individual. That's where I am. That's what I'm trying to get, right? Uh, it's kind of hard. It's kind of difficult. It really is, because the social norms that are ingrained in our society are very deep and very hard to combat, because you become an intruder because of the way you think. You become an intruder. You become intrusive. Men feel like, no, now my wife is speaking up to me. It's because of that guy. You know, such things. Such things we want to completely eliminate, because if there are no, if there is um, no gender discrimination, and this is where you put it um, into into the democratic system, that you have policies, yeah, where a woman who feels like she's a victim of gender discrimination can put up a case, right? Can put up a case, and by putting up that case, she can present her actual capacity, skill, and ability, and how gender discrimination um, leads to this being diminished, sort of, right? So democracy is growing. That's my point. By going back and looking at democracy, I want to look really deep at the role that women played in our democracy, because I really don't know. I know the wars were fought mostly by men, um, but the whole thing of women were uh, manning the house. Women were in charge of the house in the absence of a man. Yada yada yada. I don't think that um, that is the only role that women played. I think women played a much more significant role that is not being admitted by history, because it might scandalize the whole thing, right? So it's really nice, to tell you the truth. It's really nice to to think back about back in the day and how these systems came by and how history was history managed to censor the role that certain women had, and especially in Africa, ne? Because in Africa, women were uh, in some cultures, right? They were actually more respected, or held in a higher regard than men, and there were a lot of women chiefs, right? Who were strategists, who were who were change makers, right? Who got censored out, um, because it would it would initially lead to boosting the confidence of more women, right? It's like society doesn't want to have radical women, right? Now, there's argumentative people, people that argue, angry, and all of that. And then there are leaders, right? Now we have to uh, mentor female leaders the same as we do with our male leaders. And if I get that idea right, um, if I, of gender discrimination, as I'm calling it, it's a so-called, right? It doesn't really exist. It's my concept. It's part of my theorizing. I think if I get this concept right, the ripple effect, the ripple effect would be a change in cultures, and more importantly, uh, a deeper understanding and acceptance of democracy. Right? I think that will be the ripple effect. We noticed what happened when women were finally allowed to vote. All of a sudden, people that did not have as much power, money, and influence winning, because that's not what women looked at. They looked at the skill set, the articulation of these individuals, and so forth, and that's how they went to the ballot. And they changed the game. But I think there is still this next phase, but I don't want it to be radicalized, which is what most so-called, and I call them so-called feminists, try to do. They try to put macho-ness into women, because as a society we think, you know, softness, tenderness is weakness, and it's not. It's empathy, and empathy leads to a lot of understanding. So, yeah, that's why I'm looking into democracy, as well as Genesis. I'm also looking at China, the role of women in China, how women are marginalized in China, um, how the population um, leads to a lot of objectification, and how media, how media is sort of, what can I say, subliminally, subliminally suppressing women. You know, beauty, you're beautiful, that's your strength. That's not where true power lies. True power is in, to me, is what I think. True power is in thinking, skills, problem solving, articulation, and being able to be pragmatic, right? And there is a lady I know who she was deemed radical, right? She's what I call a power woman. I call them power women or Amazons, uh, you know, and her impact, how her impact is, and the work that she put in got stolen by some men, and who actually managed to suppress her and take her out of the game. This is a great injustice. I believed she was going to climb much higher because of the way she viewed things. She was completely uh, gender pragmatic, right? Someone who saw gender discrimination, as I call it, spoke 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 about it and spoke down on it, but did not make it it's the men's fault thing, right? Because this is our problem, and it's our move towards transformation. It's our move towards that transformation, and a lot of good female leaders who have that potential uh, should start to get the spotlight that they deserve, right? They should start getting the spotlight that they deserve because their perspective is not the male perspective. And this is why I started off with democracy was mostly uh, started by men. So the female perspective of what democracy is where we will be able to see what are the flaws and how we can address them. And more importantly, I think the uh, the the use of force to get points across, and the use of force uh, to win battles or to win territory and all of that. It's really something that will be addressed when we look at democracy from the other perspective. I'm a guy and a heterosexual guy, so it's kind of hard for me to think like a woman. Um, that's why I listen to women, especially women who like I said, Aditi, who speak not based on the fact that they are women, but who speak based on the platform and the topic itself, right? This to me is commendable. I totally respect it, as well as the emotional support that women provide a lot of countries and communities. This is downplayed, right? It's downplayed, but you know, that thing like behind every powerful man is a powerful woman. It's true in that who who gives you the ultimate perspective? It's the woman, the ladies. They present more empathy and they instill more empathy, right? And this is a very significant thing, and it's significant because it will help in the third bullet point that I have, which is disarming nations and having, disarming nations and having the rule of law and diplomacy as the tool, for negotiations and all of that. Because I think using the gun and bombs and all of that, it's lazy. It's lazy because it suppresses a very effective uh, manner of doing things, and that is the concept of forgiveness, right? It's been the beginning. Like, when they found Saddam and he was later on, no, Gaddafi, when they found Gaddafi and they punished him in the disgusting manner that they did, I think that was completely wrong. I think there would have been a very positive outcome and a progressive outcome had they given him amnesty. Seriously, if he was still alive but not in power, that's where you show that you're fighting for democracy. But by the humiliation and having him killed, that was a show that democracy is not as sophisticated and is not as perfect as most claim, and there's still a lot that needs to be tweaked, right? It's about mindsets. It's about mindsets. Now, when you have an army of men and women, and I'm not talking a military army, who have a message, you have more capacity for change because now you have more numbers. Just like with the ballot, how uh, women voting changed the game, not the game, but how it changed a lot of things. Um, I still think that women had a very, very big role in uh, the demolishing segregation. I still believe they had a greater role, which of course gets overshadowed by the powerful men, right? So that's why I use the Olympics analogy. We can have the best athlete here, and we can have the best athlete here, right? But that does not mean that this athlete should now suppress the other one's achievement, right? It's a fact. Men are faster than women when it comes to athletics. The fastest woman is not as fast as the fastest man, but that does not take away the fact that she is still the fastest woman, right? It does not, and it does not mean that the fastest man now has to run with the fastest woman. You understand? So there is a lot of room for more collaboration, and this collaboration is the way forward. The more women we include in leadership, and I'm talking about capable women, like the lady that I spoke about, she was a very good leader to me. When she spoke, I listened, right? So if you have more collaboration of us mentoring and building up more female leaders, and not just based on gender, because it's a different platform from our physical uh, differences. You understand? We have moved away from the times of cutting down uh, trees and living in caves and all of that. Now we have machinery, right? Now we have something that replaces raw manpower, uh, which is machinery. And I would have thought that it would lead to having more women involved in things like farming or so forth. But it does. We still look uh, to men. When you think of a farmer, you think of a hard-working man, who cares for his crops and so forth. You don't picture a woman. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying that if it was a woman, it should not be a strange sight. I know a lot of farmers who happen to be women. I do, um, but I'm saying this to sort of just simplify what I'm trying to put forward, um, and I hope I made it as simple as I could, as into why I am looking into democracy, slavery, uh, power, as well as colonization of Africa, as well as independence of Africa, the independence of Africa, and so forth. I'm looking at the impact that that has on society as a whole. And if we're going to say society as a whole, we need to include the impact that it has on women as well, just as much as we do the impact that it has on men, right? Because that other perspective, that other perspective is very important, right? Um, there's a lot of things like a good female leader should be a leader that thinks like a man, which isn't true. It's not true. Um, I think a leader is a leader, irrespective of their gender. yeah, um, plus I have to study. I'd bring a lot of stuff. But yeah, this Miller.